I got my dream job, a secret I kept from my controlling father until the very last minute. But on my very first day, he stormed into my new office and demanded to speak to my boss. "She can't handle this job," he said, trying to get me fired. "She's too fragile." This is a story about breaking free from a controlling family and finding your own power in the process. Before we get to the office, I'd love to know, what city are you watching from today? And be sure to subscribe for our daily stories. Okay, let's go back to the night I finally told them. For the first 27 years of my life, I was the perfect porcelain doll in my father's perfectly curated dollhouse. He was not a tyrant, not in the traditional sense. He did not yell, he did not scream. His control was a much quieter and far more insidious thing. It was a suffocating blanket of love and concern. He was a man who had built his own successful engineering firm, and he believed, with an absolute and unshakable certainty, that he knew what was best for everyone, especially for his fragile, artistic daughter, me. My life was a series of his safe, sensible choices. He chose my university major, he helped me find my first job, a quiet, stable, and deeply unfulfilling position as an administrative assistant at a friend's company, a place where he could keep an eye on me. My mother, Marian, was his silent, gentle accomplice, her constant refrain a soft, worried whisper, "Your father only wants what's best for you, dear." But in the quiet, lonely hours of the night, in my childhood bedroom that I still lived in, I had been building a secret life. For the last 6 months, after my parents were asleep, I had been secretly and frantically applying for jobs. Not the safe jobs my father would approve of, but the ambitious, terrifying, and dream jobs at the top firms in the city. Jobs I knew I was qualified for. Jobs that made my own heart beat a little faster. The interview with Alcott Industries, the most innovative and competitive marketing firm in the state, had been a miracle. I had walked in, a quiet, unassuming administrative assistant, and for the first time, I had spoken my own truth. I had shared my own secret and brilliant ideas, and their formidable, legendary CEO, Mr. Alcott, had seen something in me. He had offered me a position as a junior creative strategist. A real job, a real career, a real life. I had accepted on the spot. I had quit my old, safe job the next day, and I had kept it all a secret. Until tonight, the night before I was to start my new life. I told them over dinner. I waited for a pause in my father's usual monologue about his own business successes, and I took a deep breath. "I have some news," I said, my voice quiet but clear. "I quit my job at Henderson's, and I'm starting a new one tomorrow at Alcott Industries." The silence that followed was a cold, heavy, and deeply disapproving thing. My mother just stared at me, her hand flying to her mouth. But it was my father, Arthur, whose reaction I had been dreading. He slowly placed his fork and knife down, his face a mask of calm, controlled, and deeply disappointed fury. "You did what?" he asked, his voice a low, dangerous whisper. "Without consulting me? Without discussing it with your mother and me?" "I'm 27 years old, Dad. I don't need to consult you." He just shook his head, a look of profound, pitying sadness on his face, a look that was far more cutting than any anger. "Lila," he began, his voice the tone of a man explaining a complex equation to a small, foolish child. "You are not ready for a place like Alcott Industries. It is a shark tank. They will eat you alive. You are a good girl, but you are fragile. You are not a killer. You do not have what it takes." He stood up from the table, his own dinner unfinished. "You will fail," he said, his words not an opinion, but a final, absolute judgment. "And when you do, and you will, do not come running back here expecting me to pick up the pieces. You have made your bed. Now you must lie in it." I walked out of their house that night, his final, damning words, "You will fail," ringing in my ears. He thought he had delivered a killing blow to my confidence, a final patriarchal decree that would send me crawling back to him, begging for his forgiveness and his safe little job. He had no idea that his words, his profound and utter lack of faith in me, had not broken me. They had done the opposite. They had set me free. He had just given me the one thing I needed most in the world, a fire in my belly, a dragon to slay, and a desperate, burning, and glorious need to prove him wrong. I woke up the next morning before my alarm, the words of my father, a cold, final judgment still ringing in my ears. You will fail. For a moment, in the quiet, gray light of the dawn, I allowed myself to believe him. The fear was a physical thing, a cold, heavy knot in the pit of my stomach. He was right. I was a fraud. I was a quiet, unassuming administrative assistant who had somehow, through a fluke of luck, managed to fool one of the most powerful CEOs in the city into giving her a job she was not qualified for. I was going to walk into that office, and I was going to fail. But then, as I stood in front of my mirror, another feeling began to push through the fear, a slow, burning, and deeply unfamiliar anger. For 27 years, I had allowed my father's definition of me to be my reality. I was fragile. I was artistic. I was not a killer. I was a daughter to be protected, a life to be managed. His words were not a prophecy. They were a cage he had been building around me my entire life. And today was the day I was going to break out of it. I did not dress as the fragile daughter. I dressed for war. I put on a sharp, powerful, and impeccably tailored suit, a suit that I had bought with my own hard-earned money and had been saving for a day just like this. I was not just getting ready for a new job, I was getting ready to meet myself for the very first time. The offices of Alcott Industries were a world away from the quiet, sleepy firm my father had chosen for me. The lobby was a cathedral of glass and steel, buzzing with the electric, high-stakes energy of 100 brilliant, ambitious, and deeply competitive people. My father's words echoed in my head again. A shark tank. They will eat you alive. For a moment, my own confidence wavered. My new boss, the legendary Mr. Alcott, was exactly as formidable as I remembered from my interview. He was a man in his late 50s, with sharp, intelligent eyes that seemed to see right through you, to the very core of your ambitions and your fears. He did not coddle me. He did not waste time with pleasantries. He led me to my new desk in the heart of the bustling, open-plan creative department, and he laid out his expectations with a cool, clinical precision. I don't hire people based on their resumes, Ms. Cole, he said, his voice a low, powerful baritone. I hire them based on their potential. In your interview, I saw a spark of a brilliant and very hungry mind. Don't make me regret my decision. He then handed me a thick, intimidating-looking project folder. This is your first assignment, he said. The launch strategy for the new Hawthorne account. It is our biggest client, and the first presentation is in 2 weeks. Welcome to the team. And then he was gone, a whirlwind of power and purpose, leaving me alone in my new desk with a project that was clearly designed to be a test, a trial by fire. I opened the folder, my heart a mixture of pure, unadulterated terror and a new, exhilarating sense of purpose. This was it. This was real. I was a player in the big leagues now. I spent the next 2 hours in a state of deep, focused concentration, the noise of the busy office fading into a distant hum. I was a good analyst. My father had never seen it, but it was true. I could see the patterns in the data, the story that the numbers were trying to tell, and for the first time I felt alive. I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. It was in this state of happy, focused, and deeply productive bliss that the intercom on my new phone buzzed. "Miss Cole," the polite, professional voice of the receptionist said, "I'm so sorry to bother you, but there is a gentleman at the front desk, a Mr. Arthur Cole. He says he is your father." The blood in my veins turned to ice. No, it was not possible. How did he even know where I was? He says, the receptionist's voice continued, now with a hint of an uncomfortable confusion, that he needs to speak with your supervisor, Mr. Alcott, immediately. He says it is a personal and very urgent family emergency. I was no longer a creative strategist. I was a 16-year-old girl again, caught breaking curfew. The mortification was a physical thing, a hot, burning wave of shame that washed over me. He was here. He was here to sabotage me. He was here to prove to the world and to me that he had been right all along. I stood up from my desk, my legs weak and unsteady, the curious, questioning eyes of my new colleagues on me. I began the long, terrible, and deeply humiliating walk across the open-plan office towards my new boss's glass-walled office. I reached the door, my heart a cold, dead stone in my stomach. It was slightly ajar, and through the small, vertical crack, I could hear my father's voice. It was not the angry voice of a man confronting a stranger. It was the voice he always used when he was trying to control me, the calm, reasonable, and deeply, deeply patronizing voice of a father who was just trying to do what's best for his poor, misguided child. I'm telling you, Mr. Alcott, you have made a terrible mistake. My daughter, she's a good girl, a sweet girl, but, and I could almost hear the sad, pitying shake of his head, she cannot handle this job. I stood outside my new boss's office, my hand frozen on the cool steel handle of the door, a prisoner in my own nightmare. The voice drifting through the small crack in the door was my father's, but the words were a betrayal so profound, so absolute, that they felt like they were coming from a stranger. She cannot handle this job. He was not just expressing a lack of faith, he was actively and methodically trying to sabotage my future, to drag me back into the safe, small, and suffocating cage he had built for me. The old Lila, the girl I had been just yesterday, would have run. She would have fled down the hallway, out of the building, and back to the familiar, comfortable misery of her old life. His prophecy of her failure now a self-fulfilled one. But the woman who stood there now, the woman in the sharp, powerful black suit, was someone different, and she was done with running. With a deep, steadying breath, I pushed the door open and walked in. The scene was exactly as I had pictured it. My father, Arthur, was standing in the middle of the vast, sunlit office, his face a mask of a deep and deeply performative fatherly concern. My boss, Mr. Alcott, was sitting behind his massive mahogany desk, his own face a complete and utterly unreadable poker face. He did not look surprised. He just looked analytical. My father turned as I entered, and a flicker of something, annoyance, panic, crossed his face before he quickly replaced it with his mask of concern. "Lila, honey," he began, his voice a soft, placating thing. "I was just explaining to Mr. Alcott that there has been a terrible misunderstanding." I walked further into the room and stood beside my father, not as a child, but as a colleague. I did not look at him. I looked directly at my new boss. "Mr. Alcott," I said, my own voice a marvel of calm control, "I am so sorry for this intrusion." "Your father," Mr. Alcott said, his voice a calm, even baritone, "has been expressing his reservations about your suitability for this role." "I see," I said. My father, seeing his opening, continued his assault. "Mr. Alcott," he said, his voice now a low, pleading thing, "I am only here because I love my daughter. She is a brilliant girl, a gentle, artistic soul. This world," he gestured around the high-powered minimalist office, "is not for her. The pressure, the competition, it will break her. I have seen it happen before. I am begging you, as her father, for her own good, to rescind your offer. Let her come back to a job where she can be safe, where she can be happy." He was painting a picture of me as a fragile, unstable child,
a piece of delicate porcelain that would shatter at the first sign of pressure. He was trying to destroy my credibility, my professionalism, my entire future, all under the guise of paternal love. Mr. Alcott did not respond to him. He did not even look at him. His sharp, intelligent eyes were fixed with an unnerving, analytical intensity on me. It was a test, the real test. The project on my desk had been a simple evaluation of my skills. This was an evaluation of my character. My father had, in his own monstrous way, just handed me my final job interview. "Ms. Cole," Mr. Alcott said, his voice still a calm, even, and deeply challenging sound, "what do you have to say about your father's assessment?" The entire vast and silent room seemed to hold its breath. My father was looking at me with a sad, pitying smile, certain that I was about to crumble. My boss was looking at me with an unreadable hawk-like gaze, waiting. My entire brand new future was balanced on the point of a pin. I did not crumble. I turned and I faced my father. "Dad," I began, my voice shaking slightly, but with an undercurrent of a strength he had never heard from me before. "I love you, and I know in your own twisted way you believe you are protecting me. But for my entire life," I said, my voice gaining strength with every word, "your protection has been a cage. You are right. I am a good girl, but I am not fragile. And I am done," I said, my voice now a clear, final declaration of my own independence. "I am done being safe."
I then turned back to face my boss. "Mr. Alcott," I said, my voice now perfectly steady, the voice of the professional I had been hired to be. "I apologize, sincerely and profoundly, for my father's unprofessional and deeply inappropriate intrusion. It is a personal family matter that has, to my deep and personal regret, spilled into my professional life." I looked him straight in the eye. "I can assure you, with absolute and total certainty, that it will not happen again." I then took a step back, a gesture of finality. "Now, if you'll excuse me," I said, "I have a launch strategy for the Hawthorne account on my desk, and I would very much like to get back to it." I turned to leave the office, my speech and my career complete. I had said everything I needed to say. The rest was up to him. "Miss Cole?" His voice, a sharp, authoritative sound, stopped me just as my hand reached the doorknob. "Wait." I turned. My father was standing there, a look of pure, stunned disbelief on his face. But my boss, Mr. Alcott, was looking at me, and for the very first time, a small, genuine, and deeply, deeply impressed smile was on his face. "Don't worry about the Hawthorne account for the rest of the day," he said. "I have a new first assignment for you. I want you to go down to the Human Resources Department and speak with them about renegotiating your starting salary." He paused, his smile widening as he looked at my stunned father. "I have a sudden and very strong feeling," he said, his eyes twinkling, "that we are underpaying you." My father, Arthur, who had walked into this office so full of a calm, righteous, and paternalistic certainty, now looked like a man who had been struck by lightning. He stared at Mr. Alcott, his mouth slightly agape, his mind clearly unable to process the new and catastrophic reality of the situation. The fragile, porcelain doll daughter he had tried to protect had just, in the space of 3 minutes, proven herself to be made of pure, unadulterated steel. "Now, Arthur, if you don't mind," Mr. Alcott said, his voice now a cool, dismissive instrument of business as he stood up from behind his desk. "My new junior strategist and I have a great deal of work to do. I believe you know the way out." He then walked over to me, placed a firm, respectful, and deeply paternal hand on my shoulder, a gesture that was a world away from my own father's suffocating control, and he guided me towards the door. "Let's go and get you that raise," he said with a small conspiratorial wink, "and then you can tell me your real ideas about the Hawthorne account." As we walked out of his office and back into the bustling open-plan workspace, I did not look back at my father. I did not need to. I could feel the weight of his stunned, defeated silence behind me.
The other employees, who had clearly overheard the entire dramatic exchange, did not stare with pity. They looked at me with a new and deeply felt respect. I was no longer just the new girl. I was a survivor, a warrior. The meeting with human resources was a blur. My salary was increased by a staggering 30%. I was given a new title. I was given a new and profound sense of my own worth. When I finally returned to my desk, my head spinning with the impossible, wonderful, and terrifying events of the last hour, he was waiting for me. My father. He was standing by my desk, looking small and old and completely out of place in this world of bright, youthful, and ambitious energy. "We need to talk, Layla," he said, his voice a low, pleading whisper. I did not want to talk. I wanted to work. I wanted to dive into the Hawthorne account and prove to Mr. Alcott and to myself that his faith in me was not misplaced. But I looked at my father's face, at the deep and genuine pain in his eyes, and I knew that this one final conversation had to happen. We went to a small, anonymous coffee shop in the lobby of the building. We sat in a tense, uncomfortable silence, two strangers who had spent a lifetime in the same house. "I don't understand," he finally began, his voice a raw, broken thing. "I was just trying to protect you, Lila. This world, it is a cruel and unforgiving place. I didn't want to see you get hurt." I looked at him, at this man I had both loved and feared my entire life, and for the very first time, I saw him not as a tyrant, but as a deeply flawed and deeply frightened man, a man who was so terrified of the world's potential to hurt his daughter that he had chosen to hurt her himself, just to keep her in a cage he believed was safe. "You weren't protecting me, Dad. You were limiting me. You were so afraid of me failing that you never, ever gave me the chance to succeed." I leaned forward. "You didn't see me. You never have. You just saw your own fears, your own idea of who I was supposed to be. And that," I said, the final, simple, and heartbreaking truth settling between us, "is a pain that is so much deeper than any failure in the business world could ever be." He just sat there, the coffee in his cup growing cold, and for the very first time in my entire 27 years of life, he had absolutely nothing to say. He was finally, truly listening. The old dynamic, the one of the all-knowing father and the obedient, fragile daughter, was broken, forever. And in its place, a new, uncertain, and deeply fragile possibility was beginning to form. The possibility of two adults, two equals, finally getting to know each other for the very first time. The battle was over. The long and difficult work of rebuilding was just about to begin. I walked back into the bright, buzzing, and impossibly intimidating open-plan office of Alcott Industries, my heart a strange and unfamiliar mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. The confrontation with my father, the one that I had been dreading and avoiding my entire adult life, was over, and I had survived. More than that, I had, for the very first time, won. I returned to my desk, the thick, intimidating folder for the Hawthorne account still sitting there, waiting for me. I felt the curious, speculative eyes of my new colleagues on me, but for the first time, I did not feel a sense of fear. I felt a quiet and deeply profound sense of belonging. This was my desk. This was my job. This was my life. As I was sitting down, my boss, Mr. Alcott, walked out of his glass-walled office. He walked past my desk, and for a moment, I thought he was going to ignore me, to pretend the entire mortifying episode with my father had never happened. But he stopped. He didn't ask about my father. He didn't ask if I was okay. He just looked down at the open folder on my desk. "Welcome back, Ms. Cole," he said, his voice a calm, even baritone. "I'm glad you decided to stay. Now, about that Hawthorne account. I'm expecting a preliminary strategy on my desk by Friday. don't disappoint me." And then he was gone, a whirlwind of power and purpose.
It was the greatest and most respectful gift he could have possibly given me. He was treating me not as a victim, but as a professional. The weeks that followed were a blur of hard, joyful, and deeply challenging work. I threw myself into the Hawthorne account with a passion and a focus I didn't know I possessed. I worked 12-hour days. I lived and breathed marketing data and brand strategy. And I was good at it. I was brilliant at it. The quiet, analytical mind that my father had always dismissed as a hobby was, it turned out, a formidable weapon in the corporate world. I presented my preliminary strategy to Mr. Alcott and the rest of the creative team, and I watched as their expressions of polite, professional interest slowly transformed into a look of genuine and deeply satisfying awe. The relationship with my family, in the meantime, was a quiet and awkward process of reconstruction. My mother, Marian, was the first to call. She was, as always, trying to smooth things over, to pretend that the ugliness had never happened. "Your father is just worried about you, dear," she had said, her voice a little too bright. "He just loves you so much." "No, Mom," I had replied, my own voice calm, but with a new, hard-won firmness. "That is not what love looks like, and we are not going to pretend that it is. Not anymore." My father, Arthur, called a few days later. The conversation was stilted and full of long, heavy silences. He did not apologize, not in so many words, but he did something he had never done before. He asked me about my day. He asked me about my work, and he listened. It was a small, fragile, and almost imperceptible beginning, but it was a beginning nonetheless. The true test came 2 weeks after my first day. It was the morning of my first major presentation to the Hawthorne client. I was in the main, intimidating boardroom, the same room where my father had tried to sabotage me. My own presentation now loaded onto the massive screen. Mr. Alcott was there, the entire senior team was there, and the clients were on a large video screen, their expectant, powerful faces looking out at me. This was it, the moment to prove my father wrong and to prove Mr. Alcott right. Just as I was about to begin, the door to the boardroom opened. The entire room turned to look. It was my father. He was standing in the doorway, looking small and old and deeply out of place. He was holding a small, simple, and slightly awkward-looking bouquet of flowers. My heart, which had been pounding with a nervous, professional energy, now seemed to stop altogether. He's here to do it again, I thought, a wave of cold, sick dread washing over me. He's here to finish the job. But his face was not a mask of angry, paternalistic concern. It was a face of a pure and deeply humbling pride. He looked at me, and then at my very surprised and very powerful boss. He said, "I am so sorry to interrupt. I will not take a moment of your time. Then he looked back at me, and his eyes, for the first time in my entire life, were full of a clear and unambiguous belief in me. He said, "I just wanted to wish my daughter good luck. I know she is going to be brilliant." He walked over, placed the small, simple, and deeply beautiful bouquet of flowers on the conference table in front of me, gave my shoulder a quick, awkward but deeply loving squeeze, and then he turned and walked out of the room without another word. I stared at the flowers, a simple, beautiful, and deeply, deeply meaningful bouquet. I looked at my boss, Mr. Alcott, who was now smiling, a real, genuine, and deeply understanding smile. And then I looked at the expectant faces of the clients on the screen. My father's trial, his long and painful test of my own worth, was finally over. Now it was time for mine to truly begin. I gave the presentation of my life. The ideas, which had once been the secret, fearful whispers of my own mind, now came out as a clear, confident, and brilliant strategy. I was not the fragile daughter my father had once described. I was a professional, a leader, a woman who knew her own worth. We won the account. It was a massive, company-altering victory, and it was mine. The months that followed were a quiet and deeply satisfying process of building my career and rebuilding my family. The relationship with my father was not magically healed overnight. It was a slow and sometimes awkward process. It was built on a new foundation of hesitant but honest conversations. He would call, not to give me advice, but to ask for my opinion. I would visit for Sunday dinner not as an obedient child, but as an equal, a fellow adult. We were two strangers, a father and a daughter, learning to see each other for the very first time without the distorting filter of his control and my fear. My mother, Marion, in her own quiet way, began to change as well. Seeing her daughter, the one she had dismissed as the artistic one, now a rising star at the city's most powerful firm, forced her to reevaluate the shallow, superficial metrics by which she had judged us both. The story ends on a cool autumn evening, a year after my first terrible and wonderful day at Alcott Industries. I am not in a boardroom. I am at a small, elegant art gallery. It is the opening night of my father's first ever photography exhibition. After retiring from the firm he had built, he had, with my encouragement, finally returned to his own long-abandoned first love. The gallery is filled with his beautiful, soulful black and white photographs of the city, and he is not the angry, controlling man I had known. He is a man at peace, his face full of a quiet, creative joy. I stand with him, my arm linked through his, as he talks to the guests. My mother is at his other side, her face full of a genuine and deeply felt pride in her husband, not for his business, but for his art. My boss, Mr. Alcott, is here, not as my boss, but as a friend, a mentor. I look at my father, at this new and wonderful man he has become. I had spent my entire life believing that his love was a cage, but I had been wrong. His control had not been about me, it had been about his own fear, his fear of the world, his fear of failure. And by breaking free, by proving to him that I was not fragile, that I could not just survive, but thrive, I had, in a strange and beautiful and deeply unexpected way, set him free too. His success, this beautiful second chapter of his own life, was the greatest and most unexpected gift of all. My journey had not just been about finding my own voice, it had been about helping him find his again. And in that quiet, art-filled room, surrounded by the people I loved, I knew that our family, our strange, broken, and now healing family, had finally and truly found its way home. An absolutely beautiful and powerful story about breaking free from family expectations and in the process, healing the entire family. What a wonderful journey for Lila and her father. What do you think of the father's final act of support at the big presentation? Let us know in the comments below. If you were moved by this incredible story of a new beginning, please show your support by hitting that like button and be sure to subscribe for more powerful and emotional stories. Don't forget to click the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.